to today's episode of the Declutter Hub podcast, your channel for super easy, no-nonsense advice on how to declutter and organise your home. Please welcome your hosts, professional organisers Ingrid Jansen and Lesley Spellman.
Hello listeners and welcome to episode 24 of the Declutter Hub podcast. I'm Lesley and today I'm talking to Liz Law from Let Liz Clean Up Your Clutter. Now Liz and I met about 9 years ago when both of us decided to build a business from other people's clutter. I've got to say it was a bit of a risk, but I'm glad to say we are both still here today, still standing and still thriving in our own businesses. Liz has got a different take on clutter from me. I'm a professional organiser, as you know, and Liz is a professional eBay seller there to clear up and clean and sell your clutter. Liz works in Manchester, not far from me, but there are lots and lots of other professional eBay sellers out there around the world and the country. So, Liz, welcome.
Thank you.
Do you want to tell us a little bit about your business and how it's evolved over those 9 years?
Yeah, well, I started selling other people's stuff on eBay about 15 years ago in total, when my children were little and the mums and dads from school wanted me to sell the odd item for them for a cup of coffee and a slice of cake. Then they started coming to me with carrier bags full of items and told me I had to charge them. How I decided to work out what to charge friends and families, it was a huge question, but it evolved from there, and about 10 years ago I got made redundant from my day job, and I said to my boss it was the opportunity I needed to see if I could actually make a living from selling other people's items.
I can remember seeing you outside as I was dropping some eBay stuff off, and I can remember that week when you're like, this is it, I've been made redundant from my job and I'm trying to do this full time, because I think when we first met you were still doing it, you were still working,
I was working
you?
part-time.
Absolutely, and I can honestly remember it so vividly, but you're still here and you are the lady.
Yeah.
Liz, the eBay lady around Manchester. So that's brilliant. So we've got a different take on decluttering. So the first thing that I want to say, my take normally when I'm decluttering with clients is that the decluttering is the most important part of the process, and what people should be focused on is the decluttering and not necessarily too focused on selling the stuff. Because I think for a lot of people, not everybody, it is a little bit of a barrier sometimes, and people become too fixated on the amount of money that they're going to get back from the stuff and not focus enough on the decluttering of the stuff, which is the primary focus. But obviously you and I are coming at it from very different angles. So it'll be interesting to hear from you today some hints and tips, and to hear about, what kinds of things do sell well, whether people are realistic with the kind of things that they expect to get money for, and the nuts and bolts really of how you actually do it, because you've been doing it, obviously you're doing it professionally, and I guess I know that you have fantastic processes and really slick systems to make sure that you can do it very effectively and very efficiently. But a lot of our listeners are going to be wanting to do it for themselves, so this is really all about giving them a little bit of insight into it so that they can go out there and do it themselves if it's the sensible thing to do. So, straight to the important question, what sort of things can you make money from on eBay?
Well, I would say once you've done your declutter and you've got your pile of items, ideally you should be looking at putting them into things that you might be able to get some money from, other things that probably won't sell on eBay, and you can either look for alternative sites to sell them on, or it may just be that they need to go to the charity shop because they might only sell for pennies, if at all. When I'm looking to sell items on behalf of clients, the key thing I'm looking for is brand names. When people are buying on eBay, they're going to be looking for Laura Ashley, Marks and Spencer, high street names that they recognise and they know that it's quality items, as well as the more quirky and unusual things that people might be searching for on eBay.
Okay, and so things that have got sort of tags on, obviously they're going to be better than things without, I guess.
Yeah.
Does it make a difference?
Yeah, if things are new, then if it's got the tags and things have never been worn or things haven't been taken out of the box, it's definitely a lot more appealing than something that's been used and some of its shelf life's already been used up.
Okay, so obviously we've got global listeners, but just talking about UK brands now. So is there anything that you think, it's just not worth it? So in my head, I'm thinking things like Primark and
high street clothing. What has happened over the years is that more and more people are turning to eBay to sell their items. So the market is flooded. So it's a buyer's market rather than a seller's market. So again, personally, I don't tend to sell the high street brands. But if you've got a bundle of items of high street labels, all the same size, UK 12, UK 18. As long as they're the same sizing, you can sell them as a bundle and hopefully
that's
make
an
some
interesting
money.
point. So, if all your stuff's not really expensive, actually, if you bundle, say, 10 dresses together from Next or whatever, then that's probably going to be a better way to sell them than to sell them to try and sell them individually.
Or coordinating tops and skirts and tops and trousers.
Right, okay. And I think, I've seen a lot of people do that with baby items as well. There's always a lot of bundles on baby clothes as well, isn't there?
Yeah. Now, baby clothing can be difficult to sell. Again, personally, I don't sell it on behalf of clients anymore because people can buy a lot of baby items quite cheaply, brand new, from some of the high street shops and some of the supermarkets. So I tend to say pick out the cute little outfits that really appeal to you rather than the baby vests, which sometimes get marked and stained because they're being used all the time. So it's really, as a guide, I would say to somebody, would you be prepared to pay money for that and use it on yourself or your child?
Yeah, rather than just go to the shops and buy. You can buy things so inexpensively these days, can't you? And so would you prefer to buy something secondhand? Etc. So it's going to need to be a good brand before you're going to make that leap, really, isn't it?
Yeah.
So that's kind of clothing. That gives us a good idea with clothing. And right across the range of sizes, is that fine as well? So all the way from
Although from personal experience, I've found that, for example, shoes, popular sizes are UK 5, 6 and 7. Smaller sizes, UK 4 and smaller for ladies, or larger, I struggle again to sell.
Right.
So if you do have that particular size, I would say maybe try a few items rather than listing your whole wardrobe in one day or over the weekend. Just sample a few different items and see if they sell, and if they do, then carry on selling.
So from what you're saying, really, it sort of almost mirrors the high street, doesn't it? Because the sort of popular sizing from 10 to 14 are going to be the ones where there's more of them in the shops, and it's the same. So the less popular sizes, not popular is a bad word for sizing. You know what I mean. Yeah. So that perhaps it's better to bundle those up or something like that. Oh, that's a really good idea. So we've talked about clothes, and it's really important to talk about clothes because we're in a kind of wardrobe month for the Declutter Hub podcast at the moment. But there are lots of other things that you can sell as well. So what kind of things sell really well in your opinion?
Furniture, contemporary, tends to sell quite well. I have a lot of clients who either have houses knocked down, rebuilt, or they'll have fixtures and fittings. So even if you're having a new kitchen or a new bathroom, it's worth considering putting it onto eBay. Contemporary furniture tends to sell quite well, but the more traditional, what I call brown furniture that our grandparents might have, tends to be a little bit more difficult to move. I will try on behalf of clients to sell those types of items, but if you've got them, be prepared either for them not to sell or not to sell for a huge amount of money.
Right, okay. And what about electronics and things like that?
Yeah, again, another popular area. A lot of items now people don't need because we stream a lot on our phones, so DVD players and hi-fis can be, again, difficult to sell. But occasionally there are certain pieces of equipment that collectors will want. So before you ditch the hi-fi into the dump, have a look at the model number, have a look on eBay and search on that particular make and model number to see if similar items have sold. And then you can make a decision as to whether or not it's worth trying to sell it yourself or just finding somewhere else that will take it.
Yeah, I think that's interesting, but it's just doing that research, but not getting bogged down with that research as well. But it's so quick and easy, isn't it, for you to go on eBay and see whether there is any value in that before you, because some people think that there is all the time. Oh, somebody told me, or I believe, my Beanie Baby from the millennium are going to sell loads of money. But you can easily find that information out, and if something's on eBay and they're selling for 99 pence, then perhaps it's not worth your while to do that.
Exactly.
Because there's a lot of time and energy goes into eBay selling.
And if you have the app on your phone, if I'm out with a client and I'm not sure about whether or not it's worth selling, I can log on within 30 seconds, know whether or not it's sold on eBay and whether or not it's worth trying to sell.
Okay. And what about some of the more unusual things that you sell?
Well, I have sold a forklift truck, and I have sold a life-size statue of Lara Croft, to name a couple of things. At the moment, I have got a swimming pool heater, which I'm not convinced that eBay's the right marketplace for that, but it was worth trying to see if we might find somebody who might want that. So again, a huge piece of electrical equipment which has got plenty of life left in it.
Brilliant. It's always all good fun. I'm sure you never quite know what's coming through the door the next day.
No.
So, talking a lot about eBay, obviously you're a professional eBay seller and have been for a number of years. Do you ever go into any of the other selling sites? Would you recommend it? You know, I'm thinking things like Gumtree, Preloved, Depop. I know my daughter certainly sells quite a lot on Depop, but I think it's, you know, that kind of very cheap end fashion that she sells on Depop, vintage, Spock, that kind of thing. Did I say that right?
Yeah, Spock. yeah. It's worth having a look at them. I've tried different ones, but I keep going back to eBay just because it's the easiest one for me to use personally. I would say that the Facebook groups, the local Facebook groups, are quite useful if you've got cheaper, bigger sorts of items that you don't want to be posting that people would have to collect, like bookcases or IKEA bookcases, or big children's plastic toys. Gumtree and some of the others, you need to know what price you want in advance. The benefit of eBay is that you can put items on with the start price. In an ideal world, if you get a couple of people interested, they'll keep outbidding and push the price up. With Gumtree, you've got a set price and people will try and knock you down. So you need to have a good idea of what price you want before you go onto those websites.
Okay, so your normal sort of methodology then would be to try eBay first, which has got the bigger, sort of more slicker, I guess, systems behind it, or more flexible, and then possibly use Gumtree and Preloved, etc., afterwards.
Yeah.
Okay, brilliant. Well, so just jumping back to the clothes again, what sort of return might you expect to get realistically on, let's say it's a Karen Millen dress that's originally cost, I'm forgetting how much it is for a Karen Millen dress, but 150 quid. Right. So how much might you expect to get a return on that?
With new items, what I say as a general rough rule of thumb, a bit like a car, once you've bought something, whether or not you've worn it, it's obviously depreciated in value. So if you'd bought a Karen Millen dress for £150 last year, haven't worn it, it's still got the tags on, I would say probably list it at around £50 to begin with, for it to sell realistically. But the beauty of eBay is if you want more than that, you can always put it on, for example, at £100. If it doesn't sell the first time, you can always relist it. It takes a few seconds, reduce the price, and then you might find somebody that buys it at the slightly reduced price.
Right, okay. Yeah, it's just keeping going on it really sometimes and not thinking that it's just a one-hit option. And the other thing that I was really interested to talk about, because this is something that one of my Achilles heels when I'm working with people, is gadget boxes. So my go-to thing is, I see houses up and down the land with gadget boxes from TVs, from hi-fis, from iPhones, from just gathering, and they're like, oh, I might sell it one day. And that's fine, but normally people don't end up selling those things, and those boxes are just cluttering up people's lofts. And so I try, if I can, to convince people to get rid of a lot of gadget boxes if they can. There are some where it's a no-brainer and you absolutely need to keep them, of course. And I know recently I bought a new TV from John Lewis, and the delivery driver said to me, you need to keep your box for 28 days. And so I thought that was really interesting. So John Lewis, if you want to return something because it's faulty, or obviously think of 28 days is a realistic amount of time for you to then have the box, original box in packaging. So what's your thoughts about boxes? I've said what I think about boxes now. What do you think about boxes?
Well, I'd agree it depends on the sort of item. With a TV, I would say probably not. As long as you keep the manual and the remote control. The remote controls are really important if you're selling gadgets that were sold with one originally, because people tend to be lazy and they want to buy everything together. They don't want to buy a TV and then have to go and buy a remote control. And if they do, they expect to get your TV at quite a lot less because they're having to do some work themselves. Okay. However, smaller items like iPhones, children's toys, I would say it probably does help to keep the box.
Liz, that's not the right answer.
I know.
That is not the right answer.
I'm sorry, but it's the smaller items, not the bigger items.
Right, okay.
And what I've found is a lot of people, the kids will open the presents on Christmas Day and then they won't get played with, and a month or so later it gets stitched into the pile of things to sell. So maybe keep the boxes for the 28 days and then review as to whether or not that item's going to be played with.
Right, okay. That's given us thank you. That's fantastic. That's given us some really good insight into what kind of things do and don't sell on eBay. So going now a little bit more into the nitty-gritty of the process of selling. And I know you've got tons and tons of hints and tips, and do you know what's fantastic is you're going to write a blog for us as well with all of your best tips about eBay selling. So that should be hopefully that should be available when this podcast goes live. So I've got some questions then about the process of selling. So people talk a lot about when you're doing an auction listing, what is the best day to end that listing?
Traditionally, people will look at your Sunday afternoon, your Sunday evening. From my experience, I tend to list most things to finish Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday evenings, and throughout Saturday and throughout Sunday at the weekend, and also on bank holidays throughout those days as well. I think there is a bit of a myth that if it's going to sell, Sunday evening is the best time, but not everybody works 9 till 5, not everybody has the weekend off. So there are lots of people nationally and internationally, because I send quite a lot of items abroad. So I don't think it's as much of an issue now as it was previously.
Right, okay. No, that's good. But it's definitely got to be a time when people tend to be at home,
Yes.
I guess.
Yeah.
So evenings, weekends, bank holidays. Right,
Yeah.
okay. And so obviously you've got lots of choices when you go onto eBay as to how long you can list something for. So what's the best time? I know you can't answer that question, but what would your suggestion be for that?
From my experience, I would say that if it's a higher value item, if it's a kitchen or an expensive wardrobe or piece of furniture, put it on for 10 days to cover 2 weekends to finish on a Sunday afternoon or evening. If it's a lower value item, people tend to be quite impatient and they want to buy it and have it now. So I tend to put a lot of auctions on for 5 days.
Okay, 5 days, brilliant. And what about reserve prices and things like that? Do you set a reserve price on things? I know these things tend to add to the fees, don't they?
They do. If you put a reserve fee on, it has to be an item with a start price of around £50. They'll charge you a few pounds for that privilege. So again, what I tend to advise people to do is initially start it off at around the price you would ideally like for it. And if it doesn't sell, then keep relisting it each week and reduce the price slightly. So it saves you the reserve fees and it just saves you some time as well.
I suppose you've got that, haven't you, with your start price, but it's just all about that psychology of buying, isn't it, as to whether people will, if you go in with a high start price, whether people will buy that or not. So tell us, we're talking about fees now, so because some people might never have sold on eBay, so can you tell us a little bit about how much in terms of fees that you're likely to have to spend?
Yeah, well, there's 2 different sets of fees. For the individual on the high street, you're probably going to get charged around 35 pence for every item that you list, regardless of whether it sells or not. Once it sells, you then have to pay eBay a final value fee of 10% plus VAT on the item and the postage.
So that's the 10% of the selling price.
Yeah, and postage. And then also PayPal, if somebody's buying something and it has to be posted or couriered and they're not collecting it, they use PayPal, who charge, I think it's about 3.4% plus 20 pence on the total value of the item and the postage. So as a very rough guide, again, before you make anything, 15% will be deducted from the final value fee.
Right, okay. And talking about fees then, for you as a professional eBay seller, what sort of fees would you charge somebody then to list something? I know it's probably going to be different per item, but in general, if someone was wanting to sell a dress or sell something like that, what could they expect to pay a professional seller?
Yeah, I mean, I say as a guide, my clients tend to receive regularly between 55 and 65% of what an item sells for.
Right.
And if it's a more expensive item, they get an even better rate of return because I've got a sliding scale, and the more an item sells for, the lower my commission.
Yeah, obviously, yeah. So that makes sense. So yeah, and I know because years ago I used to do some selling as well, and I think, I would say to the client, if you outsource that selling to someone else, you can expect to get half of what it's worth, which is, and somebody like you as well, Liz, you're going to have better systems, better photography, the times, the listing, so the return will probably be much better by outsourcing that to a professional than it will to do it with yourself when you're trying to sort of make it up as you go along, so I think, there's definitely something to be gained from that.
I mean, there are key words that people will search on. And also I have a lot of followers. I've got a lot of groupies that follow me.
Yeah.
And there might be things that I wouldn't normally think of putting on eBay, but I'll go, do you know what? Beryl would buy that. I'm sure she'd buy that for a grandson. So I might put some things on and with actual buyers in mind.
Yeah, I think that's it. Because, depending on how much you get, power seller kind of listing, don't you? That kind of thing. So things like that do make a difference, and make a difference to the people, because people don't want people to mess them around, do they?
Yeah.
So they choose their sellers carefully as well as their buyers, really. So talking about we've talked about some of the processes. So there's obviously some downsides to eBay. So it's not all like, yeah, this is amazing, I'm going to sell all my stuff and make loads of money. That would be the ideal. But there are some things that are really difficult about eBay that cause people problems. Obviously, you're a professional, so you're used to dealing with that, and that's part of your professional life to deal with that. And you probably factored that into your return and your commission and so on. But for somebody, what kind of negatives are there? What sort of things? If things don't go according to plan, what sort of things might people expect?
Well, for a start, you've got to think that you're going to have to sit down either after a long day at work or a long week at work, and you're going to have to get your items, you're going to have to photograph them, you're going to have to measure them, you're going to have to describe them in detail, because it's really important that buyers receive exactly how an item was described. So you could be spending your Sunday afternoons one week listing, spending a few hours sorting it out until you get into the process of doing it yourself. And then the following Sunday, assuming you're putting it on for 7 days, all those items that you listed are hopefully going to be selling. So then the following Sunday afternoon, you're going to have to be writing out your labels, parcelling things up, finding boxes, getting bubble wrap, and then on the Monday, popping to the post office and dropping them all off. And as well as that, once the item arrives with the client, if they're not happy, they'll want to return it and have a refund, or there might be somebody out there who says you didn't mention that there was a mark here, or there might be people that don't pay and you have to go through the process of opening an unpaid item dispute. So there are awkward customers as well, unfortunately. Some of the general public can make life difficult for you.
Of course. I was just thinking while you were talking there, there's nothing more exciting about that than that Sunday night when everything, I'm sure you've got over it after 15 years, but when all of like, oh, somebody bought your item and somebody bid on your item, oh, I've got another bid, and you're all excited and stuff, but then the hard work comes the following day, doesn't it? So there is quite a lot to factor in. It's all about time versus money, isn't it, really? And I suppose you have to put a price on your time that you're spending. And if you've got all the time in the world, then there's no problem with that. But if you're tight on time, then perhaps outsourcing it to a professional is going to be a better way of doing things. Perfect. So is there anything else that you'd like to talk to us about, Liz, about eBay? Anything that I've missed out that's really important for you to explain to our listeners?
I think it's just really a case with eBay making sure that you are 100% honest about the items that you're selling. So if there are any flaws, make sure you point them out, because there's nothing worse than having a sofa delivered to Glasgow only to find that there was a wine spot under a cushion and they want to return it, because then you will be out of pocket. Also, make sure that when you are listing your items, you check on the postage, because I've heard of a number of people that have listed items but not checked the postage, and it goes up in April every year and they've been out of pocket. And just enjoy it. If you've got the time to do it, it can be quite addictive, and when the money starts rolling in, it's quite a good feeling. But on the negative side, as we've discussed, it can be difficult if you've got problems. I hate confrontation, so I will do everything in my power to avoid those problems occurring. But unfortunately, no matter what you do, something will turn up to cause you an issue.
Of course, that's just human nature, sadly, isn't it? We all have to deal with that. Oh, that's brilliant, Liz. Thank you so much for enlightening us all about eBay. I'm sure our listeners will absolutely love it, because there's so many people out there who do want to make money from their clutter, and far be it from me to say that you shouldn't be doing that. I'm a big advocate of sending things to the charity shop, but it's about being realistic about what kind of stuff that you've got. For me, nothing is good enough not to send to the charity shop, but obviously you've got to think about budget and your own money and things like that, and recouping things. And if you have been an overbuyer and you want to make that change, then it's really important to sort of, to make that money back as well. So, listeners, we hope that you've all enjoyed listening and are inspired to take some action. Let's think about what that action might be. Think about what you might have around the house that you can sell, but also make sure that whether it's the most sensible thing for you to do with your time to sell for yourself, or you can possibly find somebody like Liz to do that for you, a professional eBay seller. You can find details about Liz. I mean, obviously she works in Manchester, but I'm sure there are some people that you work for that are outside of Manchester as well, but you're definitely not global, I don't think, at this moment in time, are you, Liz? But anyway, so you can find details about Liz at www.cleanupyourclutter.co.uk, and she will be on that website selling. And but what are you on eBay as well? Have you got an eBay?
Clean Up Your Clutter 2. Clean Up Your Clutter with the figure 2.
Oh, right, okay.
And if people want to, have just got queries, they can always message me via the website.
Yeah, because you've got a lot of really good stuff on there, haven't you, Liz? So it might be worth people trying to seek you out on eBay and becoming one of those groupies that you talked about before. So thank you so much for taking the time to listen, listeners, today. If you'd like to see more tips and advice, follow us on declutterhub.com. You can find us on social media on Instagram, Twitter and Facebook. And we've got a fantastic, lively Facebook community where you can share all your wins and successes and potentially share your problems too. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope you've enjoyed this episode. If you don't want to miss the next episode of the Declutter Hub podcast, please subscribe to us on Spotify, iTunes and Stitcher. Thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of the Declutter Hub podcast. Check out declutterhub.com for more inspiration, and don't forget to tune in next week.